Hey guys, I'm Midge Ure, co-writer and producer of Do They Know It's Christmas, and we've for the first time in 37 years, we've got the kind of creative team who did all of this. So I will hand you across. Rik was my engineer in my studio at the time. Who probably remembers an awful lot more about the details, the nuts and bolts of the actual making of the song. And the other guys will come in and tell you all about the videoing and the mixing on the day, that very manic 24-hour period. So I'll pass you across to Rik.
Hi, I'm Rik Walton. As Midge says, I was his engineer. And so we spent a few days at Midge's own studio recording the backing track. Prior to the day at Psalm Studios recording all the vocals, which everybody knows and is well documented. So I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of that as we go through this. So yeah, over to Nigel maybe.
Hi, my name's Nigel Dick. I was the director of the video Do They Know It's Christmas on the day. One crazy 24-hour period, which included editing the video. And I was tasked with this job by my then boss, Tony Powell, who called me into his office one day just after lunch, and Bob was sitting there, and they told me this. Go, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Powell. I'm at that stage was the marketing director for Phonogram Records, and I was the poor sod that got it in the neck from Geldof right at the beginning. The story unfolds really, I guess, from the moment that Bob crashed into my office demanding that I put a charity record out. And I guess the rest is history.
So Bob came up with the idea that if we wrote a Christmas song and we could possibly get it to number one, that the charts freeze in the UK. The charts freeze prior to Christmas, right through the whole New Year period to January, and you can sell twice as many records at number one as you could probably do any other time of the year. So we had already set the parameters of what this thing had to be. I mean, we'd never written a song to order before. So we thought if we could knock something together and then bludgeon a few mates to come along and add their voices and strengths and fans to it, we could maybe pull this off.
From what I've got in my diaries, it was like a week later that we started putting the thing down in your studio, and we spent about 5 days recording the backing track. Just you basically, and you did all the vocals. So there was which was what we were playing on the day at Psalm to let everyone hear it. Some of the other guys came into the studio. I don't know if you remember that. Mm-hmm. Simon Le Bon and John Taylor from Duran came in.
Sting came in.
Sting came in that same day. I think that was the Friday before the Sunday at Psalm. Sting came in the evening. And
Paul Weller came in, I think, as well.
Sorry?
Paul Weller?
Yeah. Paul Weller came on the Saturday, and the film crew was there. I don't know if you were there, Nigel, were you? I really don't remember.
I did come by on Saturday afternoon for like 30 minutes. I did not have a camera. And I remember Paul Weller and Sting were there, and I just, saw what was going on and obviously just left everybody to it because I had to marshal my team for Sunday. Right.
But there is some film footage from there, which is on the documentary. There's a brief bit in your studio, isn't there, Midge?
Yeah, there is. I can't remember. I can't remember who did that. I mean, we always have cameras kicking around, so we shot it or something.
Because I always think when people see that, they must wonder where the hell that is. It's never been explained really. No, I'm sure people didn't realise that we didn't record the whole thing on the one day. So that's piece of historical information.
What happened? Obviously, while you were up at the Tube, he'd been in the office, like your studio, and used our phone and used our photocopiers and used just about everything he could get his hands on, and then started cajoling the staff into, we've got to do something, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, which completely confused the staff because they thought they were promoting the Boomtown Rats single, Dave. which they'd spent weeks being berated by Geldof that they were doing nothing to get the record on the radio or television. And then all of a sudden, he stopped them in their tracks and said, "Forget all that. I'm going to make a charity record." To which they all sort of looked very confused. Each one of them sort of seemed to follow into my office going, "Geldof's on one. He's going to make a charity record. What's going on?" So that was on the Friday. I sort of had him in the office. He'd been sort of building up to come and see me. He'd been going around every member of staff to tell me that he's going to do this record. And then eventually on Friday, he came in. Obviously, you guys were up at the Tube and said, "I'm going to do this record. It's for Ethiopia. You've got to watch this. You've got to do that." And I said, "Okay, Bob." I said, "But you're being a bit eager here. Let's just see if all these promises of artists and everything else you're talking about can come true." And I think he went to Ireland that weekend. I'm not sure. He wasn't around, but I said, "Look, come to the office first thing Monday morning and we'll discuss it." And that's when he just stormed into my office the Monday morning. He'd sort of built up over the whole weekend to the meeting and saying, "Right, I'm doing it, and this is what's happening, and this is what you've got to do, and I want this and I want that." And in the end, he sold it to me on the base. I just had to get him out of the office because he was just going completely berserk, "Yeah, yes, Bob, yeah. And within, I suppose, 2 hours, we got a whole bunch of people together in the office to discuss how this was going to happen, from the legal side to the financial side to the promotion side. And I think what really started to happen there was my staff were all sort of sucked into this, as Bob has it in certain ways to do that. Mm-hmm. But everybody seemed to want to get involved in this thing, and everything else seemed to stop in the office. And everybody started moving towards doing this thing, this record, this charity record. How are we going to do it? What's it going to cost? Where can we get this? Where can we get the sleeve made? Who's going to make the picture? Anything to do with making the record. And to be fair, the staff just jumped on it and ran with it. And the Phonogram office just became then, I guess, the first Band-Aid office.
Because we had a 24-hour period, and poor old Rik and I were there for those full 24 hours. I'm sure, Nigel, I'm sure you were there as well for the entire thing. And because we had to have the record finished. So it was all the vocals, Phil Collins drums, and mix the record. And it had to be done by 8 o'clock the next morning, the Monday morning, in order to get it to the pressing plants in time.
Yes, I've got the schedule here.
You've got it there. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, yes, the schedule, I was so tight. It was ridiculous. People were doing things that they said couldn't be done in those days, of course. And there were you making the creation, and we were just hoping and praying it was going to happen, to be quite honest.
Well, weren't we all?
What I remember Bob being there, actually, but Bob was in and out of my office all the time anyway. So as I recall, it was a Wednesday afternoon when you and I had this discussion. You said to me, "You've got to shoot this on Sunday. It has to be edited by Tuesday morning so we can take it to Michael Hurl at the Top of the Pops, and it has to be available to be shown on Top of the Pops on Thursday." Well, actually, of course, it's recorded on Wednesday. And so I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, yeah, I can do all of that. That's no problem. Of course, turning around something faster than I'd ever turned anything around. And then you gave me the kicker, which was, "Oh, and by the way, we have no money."
Yeah.
So then I know I have to blag, a film crew and all the post-production and blah, blah, blah. And simultaneously, Michael Kuhn from Polygram Music Video rang me up. And obviously you guys had a chat. And he said, look, I know you have no money, but if you need it, I have £10,000. If you absolutely need it, I can find 10 grand for you. And I'm like, oh, well, that's useful to know. So I was petrified of trying to put this all together because, you know, being very polite and too English, begging was not something I was brought up to do. Anyway, I managed to get a film crew together in like 10 minutes because I rang my buddy Dave Bridges, who'd been shooting the Tears for Fears videos with me. And he said, sure, we'll be there. And I'll get Roger Deakins, my pal, to show up, subsequently an Oscar winner. So I had a film crew. I got the post-production place that Visions in London, which doesn't exist anymore, sadly. They said, yeah, we'll do it. No problem. All the rest of it. So all I had to do was to get film. So I ring up Kodak and, yeah, we're in. How much do you want? Fine. That will be £15,000. And I said, well, no, you're not understanding the ethos of this thing we're trying to put together. We need that film for nothing. And the response was a very simple, you don't understand, we're Kodak. If you want our film, there has to be an exchange of money for our precious film. So that's where the £10,000 went. That was the only thing that we bought. I knew I had, for me, 48 hours to get this done because once we'd finished shooting on Sunday night, I took the footage to the Technicolor lab, who Technicolor processed it for free, and didn't get the footage till Monday morning. So then we had to transfer all the footage and then edit through the night to deliver on Tuesday morning. And I dropped the edited tape off with whoever was in charge of promotions at Phonogram on Tuesday morning. And to my amazement, it was introduced by David Bowie before the Top of the Pops, which was, I'm like, oh my God, David Bowie's, got some of my film.
But yeah, 5 minute slot prior to the Top of the Pops was quite a coveted thing. And of course, the moment the video was shown, and especially with someone like Bowie presenting this thing, it was mega. I mean, yeah. even prior to that, I mean, the morning that we finished the mixing of the song, I mean, after a 24-hour period, we jumped in our cars and started driving home. Bob took a cassette of the recording to Radio 1. And as I'm driving home, I had the radio on and I could hear him entering the breakfast show at Radio 1, 8 o'clock in the morning. And they played the cassette. And then when they finished it, they rewound it and they played it again. And at that moment, I knew something huge was happening. But then a few days later to have Bowie present the video was just spectacular. So it just went ballistic from that moment on. It was just total madness.
Did Bowie record that bit for the B-side, all the chat stuff? Did he do that at the same time then? No?
I can't remember. I think that was one of those oddities. I mean, we were, and I think some of this was actually captured on footage as we're making the record. Halfway through making a record, we went, oh, B-side. In those days, you had to have another track, and we hadn't got anything.
No. Well, I mean, on the day, I can't remember who it was. Somebody was asked to go around with a portable tape recorder and get quotes from all the people who were there. But Bowie wasn't there that day.
He wasn't there that day.
It was very, well presented. The dramatic bit in the middle of the B-side. I never knew when that was actually recorded.
Am I making a mistake? Am I got this thinking that Bob was phoning all these people up and just put in this tape recorder to the phone?
He did that with
McCartney, I think.
Yeah,
McCartney was done prior to that day. He had that with him. Holly Johnson, he did in the studio. We all had to suddenly be quiet because he had Holly on the phone because he couldn't make it or something, and so he was recording that bit from the mouthpiece of the phone.
I have two very clear memories which reference both of you. The first is that Of course, the singers, after doing the big chorus, which was shot and recorded first, then everybody came in to do their individual lines. And I remember, what's his name, going up to do Paul Young to do the first line, you know, and I'm crouched on the floor with the cameraman and I've got headphones on, so I'm hearing what's coming from the control room. So, and of course, nobody's heard the song, so nobody really knows what the melody is, and they've got the words on a piece of paper. So Paul Young goes, "It's Christmas time," and all right, a bit more accent on time. So he does one with time, and then another voice over the headphones come. It's a Christmas song, so make a meal out of Christmas. And then Midge, I heard your voice coming through very, very clearly saying, "You know what? We've got Paul Young. Let's hear Paul Young." And you said a line which I've never forgotten: "One singer, one song." And that's that, you know, which was, you know, I'm directing the film, you're directing the music. I mean, that was a really clear, very good, astute move, because you don't want to hear Sting do it the way, you know, somebody, you know, Geldof is screaming at him. You want Sting. That's why he's there.
You certainly don't want the way Bob was singing it, because he kept singing the wrong melody. It's Christmas time. And there's a melody on there, you know. You're right. I mean, it's actually a very astute thing, Nigel, the fact that, you know, these days you could email somebody a track and they could all learn it on their way there. But nobody had heard this. Nobody knew the song. There was no way of anyone learning it. They all had to learn it by osmosis in the studio, surrounded by their peers, surrounded by the biggest artists that we had in the UK at the time. And that's a scary, scary thing. So for anyone to stand up there and sing, you know, anything, they don't need somebody guiding them. They just let them do it. That's why they're the biggest artists that were around. You let them get on with it.
There must have been issues in churning out that amount of plastic in the time. There must have been production like, how the hell are we going to churn out this?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, like you were doing in the studio, I think those first few days, most of us were sleeping on the floor in Phonogram, because we were having to talk to people. We were trying to get things together. Just if we didn't follow things through, as you know, the record was not going to come out. You know, it was just minute by minute, hour by hour to get, as you said, Midge, get that record finished. Then are we going to have sleeves? As we know, we ended up with two different sleeves. We ended up with a sleeve that didn't have a picture of who was on the record, because it didn't exist when we did the first run of the print. You know, so we ended up with the blank bit on the back.
There you go. Whoops. Hang on.
So collector's items. But that just the case of getting people to understand what we were trying to do in those first few days was hard. But then all of a sudden, because of what happened, as you say, we got Top of the Pops, we got this, we got that. The whole swell just took off. You know, Fortnum and Mason's, Harrods, Auntie Mabel phoning up. I'm sending my money now. You will get the record to me by Christmas. So we had to set up another little bit in the office to deal with all the letters that were coming in with the money, and then making sure it was all documented so they got their records. You know, this, because obviously the legal people were going, whoa, you know, this is dangerous. If you don't do this, we're going to have somebody on the phone saying, where's my record?
Yeah. It's a difficult thing to even think about happening again. I mean, it's a very different world.
Yeah.
You know, there have been multiple versions of that record, because obviously Bob and I gave the songwriting royalties, you know, to the Band Aid Trust. So every time the record's played, it generates, you know, the money it generates goes straight to the Band Aid Trust. And therefore, you know, 37 years is still funding, you know, schools and education and whatever. And will do long after we're gone.
I've got a bill for a broken door from Dharm Studios, which I still have on my file. I was just wondering, do you think we ought to send it to Bob?
So you never paid it then, Tony?
Well, I think, in fact, poor old Nigel's budget got hit on that one, I think.
It's my non-existent budget. Yeah.
I think you might have to send that to Rik Parfitt, actually.
I wasn't going to name them.
I think it was the Naughty Boys, wasn't it? It was the.
Since he can't comment, that's fine, you know.
Yeah, I'd listen. All I can say is I was at the mixing desk whenever it happened.
So was I.
Is it?
Yeah. I got it sealed in a bit of a plastic because it is such a good letter from the then studio manager to Sarah in your office, Nigel. Just hope you have recovered from yesterday. The cleaners had a wonderful time this morning. The opening line.
Well, it's now a block of flats, so I would frame that totally.
Yeah.
I remember in the afternoon, John Moss, who I'd known previously when I worked at Stiff Records, and he was still hanging around. And I'm like, why are you hanging around? I mean, there's no, you're not a singer. You've done your chorus bit. And he said, I'm not leaving till Phil Collins comes because I hear he's going to play drums.
He played twice.
Yeah, two takes.
He came in and he sat there very patiently. And kept his little head would pop up behind the mixing desk every so often and say, "Are you ready for me yet?" And I'd say, "Well, a couple of minutes." And by the time he knew the entire song inside out, and he went out and he played it brilliantly, and then came in and listened to it and said, "I overplayed. I'll just do it again." And he simplified it, and it was still brilliant. It was just amazing. So 2 takes, and he only did the second take because he thought he played too much in the first one. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And I remember they kept coming in, he and his roadies, saying, "Where should we set the drums up?" Because the room was still full of all the film crews. I think eventually I said the only space left was like right in front of the control room window between the 2 rooms, where you'd never normally set the drum kit up. And we were doing it, and I was miking it up while we were recording the vocals. You and Stuart were in the control room recording the vocals. So I was having to keep stopping every time the red light went on to record a bit of vocal. I don't know, I think they needed to get the drum kit somewhere else that evening or something like that. But yeah, so it was ridiculous. As Nigel says, all the film crews were there all around him, as they were around the singers, cameras looking straight up people's noses while they were trying to perform, Do you know how many film crews there were there, Nigel?
Well, I had 2 cameramen with 2 assistants and a sound guy. The total number of us was 6. On the day I've been writing my memoir about everything, I've got a note that there was 72 people there.
What apart from the artists?
Journalists, cameras, sound right, people, and the big gag in the morning was, everybody stand here, we'll sing the chorus, we'll get all the photographs done, and then we'll get all you people to bugger off so we can just do the vocals. And of course, if you were the photographer for the Daily Mail and the Express guy gets in front of you, you push forward to get in front of him. And then and eventually, like Bananarama are standing and they've got a press guy this close. So it's like, guys, you have to move back. So, I become the school teacher and you have to move back. And of course, so we had another go and they all started pushing forward. And eventually I said, if you don't move back, I'll throw you out of the room. And all the artists went, ooh, ooh, he's upset now. And eventually Sarah Wills, who was my assistant, and I went across the street where there was a building site and we stole a plank from the building site and we brought it back in the studio, and she stood on one side and I stood on the other, and we slowly walked everybody back so that everybody could get a view of, the team. You were mentioning Tears for Fears earlier. Tony and I were obviously working with Tears for Fears, and they actually told me they used a sample of ours on the record. So even though we weren't able to make it, they actually knew you'd sample them, and they were very cool about it. They were very happy.
Good.
So,
Well, I know that. I mean, I've spoken to the guys since then. It was the drum sound at the beginning of The Hurting. And it was just when samplers came out at first. So, Rik and I had a sampler in the studio, and we took this and pitched it and did all, and I created that whole drum pattern using that sound. I also told Chris Hughes, who produced the record, who lives nearby, and he's a friend. So I haven't done anything particularly bad.
yeah.
And the sampling wasn't as easy in those days. I think it was it on the PPG wave?
It was on, I think we had a Bell sampler.
Oh, was it that? Okay.
A tiny little thing, or an N-Sonic or something, a keyboard, something that sampled, and it only sampled for 2 seconds, which was long enough to do a drum hit.
Yeah.
And all the vocals, all of that, all that stuff that we multi-layered at the beginning of the song with my voice was all looped and sampled and pitched and whatever. It's very creative stuff. It was all lovely. It was all lovely. Not now. You press a button now and it all does it for you.
Easy.
I hope you guys have still got your acetates.
Never did have them.
No?
Who cut it, actually?
I don't know who cut it either. I mean, we did find the multi-tracks at one point and digitized them for posterity's sake. But I think one of the multi-tracks has kind of disappeared now.
How about that one?
Oh, look at that. That's the first one I've ever seen.
Hang on to that.
Utopia.
Yes, it's I've got my hit version here, and it says Utopia on the scratch.
There you go.
So
I think the multi-tracks are unplayable by now anyway.
I think we digitized them just in time.
Well, we did that thing after 25 years, didn't we? 25-year anniversary. We played the
went
tape.
through the tracks.
That's probably the right time to get them put down.
here's the thing. I mean, we've all been very lucky. We've all done all this amazing shit in our lives. Is if what any of us did saved one life, I can argue at the gates of St. Peter when I'm trying to get in, is more worthy than, all the records I helped promote in my life. The fact that the Band-Aid is still going 37 years later is, I just blows my mind.